Executive Director of Basic Rights Oregon, and your host for today's episode. Today, we decided to delve deep into Measure 110. It's a ballot measure that would change drug laws in Oregon with the focus on providing more resources for treatment and recovery. It's an issue that disproportionately affects the LGBTQ community, and we're so excited to talk to our guest today. And as always, we welcome and comments and donations. Donations will go to cover the cost of our live captioning of today's episode. And any question, comment, or donation gets you entered into a raffle for one of our amazing Protect Trans Kids tote bags, which I just happen to have right here at my desk. And I just have to say, these bags are high quality and the perfect size when you need something bigger than a purse, smaller than a grocery bag. So I'm just sort of jumping into today's episode because we have such experts on this ballot measure who are going to tell us all the things we need to know about it, as well as share why they're so passionate about it and what a difference it's going to make for Oregon. And so I'm going to start by having people introduce themselves with their name, their pronouns, and your favorite book, movie, TV show, video game that's getting you through this pandemic. And I will be furiously writing down all your ideas because it's a very selfish question. I'm just creating an entertainment list for myself, but I'm going to start with Bobby.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bobby Byrd. I am a community organizer with the Measure 110 campaign. I use he and him pronouns. And what's helped me get through this pandemic is Netflix, Hulu, and also my NBA 2K20.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Hey, it's a video game. It's played on PS4 and Xbox One, things like that. So yeah.
Nice.
Probably true.
I did not expect that. That's great. Haven, tell us about what you've been up to.
Hi, I'm Haven Wheelock. I'm one of the chief petitioners on Measure 110. I use she, her pronouns. We're still working full time, so I don't get a lot of downtime in the work that I'm doing, but I recently watched this great documentary called My Octopus Teacher on Netflix that's like about this dude who befriends an octopus, and it was really like wholesome and lovely. So yeah, I'll stick with that.
Wholesome and lovely sounds like what we need these days. Morgan, tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Morgan Godwin, she, hers pronouns. I am a writer and a public health student. I have been in full-time classes for the entirety of the pandemic, so I've also been pretty busy. I'm a nerd, so I've been reading a lot of ethnographic books about people who use drugs and like totally nerding out on that. And binge watching. Right now I'm binge watching The Crown.
Solid. I love all British shows. I know I shouldn't. I don't know. I guess, colonization, it happens, whatever. I'm obsessed with British period time. Sami, you're and you have a baby, so I'm sure you have a lot of free time.
Thanks so much for having us, Nancy. I'm Sami Alloy. I am the political director for Yes on 110. I use she and her pronouns. And I did not start watching Schitt's Creek when it first came out, and I didn't realize how gay it was. And I've been binge watching it every night after the baby goes to bed. And I'm obsessed, but also like it's a little bittersweet because it's not real, and it's just like they're doing things in Schitt's Creek in pre-pandemic times that look so lovely, and it makes me a little bit wistful, but it's so funny and wonderful and gay.
Most important.
Yeah, I just watched the last episode with tears in my eyes the other night. So
yeah,
good.
I can't get the Tina Turner song the best out of my head.
Yeah, you can just listen to it That's what I do. I just listen to it. It's so great. Simply the best. Wonderful. So, and the second question is, why are you involved in this campaign? Start with you, Sami. Just tell us a little bit about why you're involved.
Thanks so much, Nancy. This campaign is near and dear to my heart because Measure 110 will expand life-saving treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and housing services for people who use drugs instead of criminalizing them. And I grew up in a family where a lot of people were criminalized for their drug addiction and spent a lot of time incarcerated, and it did not help them. They did not receive treatment, and it was very destabilizing for my loved ones. And I'm just rooting for people in the future to have access to a health-based approach that gives them access to dignity and care instead of incarceration. And, of course, I've worked on many policy issues in Oregon related to racial and economic justice, and the issues around mass incarceration, over-policing, and racial disparities are also deeply important to me. So when I heard about, the opportunity to work with Oregon stakeholders to advance this policy, it was a no-brainer. And I hope that everyone in Oregon feels that way, and we're going to pass it this November 3rd.
Great. Thanks. And Morgan, do you want to tell us a little bit about why you're engaged in this campaign?
Yeah, I'm incredibly passionate about this because I was severely criminalized for my addiction for years. I spent time across various jails in the state, Lane County, Washington County, Columbia County, Multnomah County. I was arrested over and over and over for my addiction. And they dressed it up. They called it alternative to incarceration. They called it drug court. They said it was there to help me. And I just ended up cycling in and out of jail over and over, being refused my medication in jail, completely being destabilized. And before my contact with the criminal justice system, I managed to maintain some semblance of a normal life. But after that, when I just started going to jail over and over, I lost my job. I became homeless. It completely destabilized me. And the worst part was they said they were doing it to help me, And that really accelerated my addiction. So after that, I was homeless and I didn't have a job. And so the whole aspect of my identity became, addiction. I didn't have anything else to rely on. And within 6 months, I was facing a federal charge for delivery resulting in death for the overdose death of my best friend. And I ended up going to federal prison for 5 years. And, upon my conviction in federal prison, they looked at my criminal history. And because I had several possession of heroines from the state of Oregon, it made me look like a career criminal. And it enhanced my sentence length as if, I had repeatedly offended like this, hardcore criminal, when really I would just had addiction with a history of addiction. And, jail is a very traumatizing place. It is not a place of healing. And so I'm very passionate about this campaign because I just hope that people in the future don't have to experience what I experienced, and that they can find healing and they can find recovery without being traumatized by the system and destabilized.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing your experience. And I know we'll get into it as we go into this conversation. But yeah, I'm glad to see you free and healthy and doing awesome. So thank you. Haven, a bit about why you're involved in this campaign?
I've been involved with this campaign before it was a campaign. I have been working with people who use primarily injection drugs for nearly 2 decades. I run a drug user health services program in Portland, and I love the work I do. I love the community I serve, and I've seen for decades how the criminalization of people I care about has led to their death, has led to them being destabilized, has led to infections that don't need to be there, has led to overdoses that don't need to happen. And so, you know, I've dedicated my career to trying to improve and make sure folks have access to the things that they need to survive wherever they're at, whether they're using currently or working to get into recovery services, abstinence programs, and really wanting to provide something better than the system we have. Because the system we have, we've been trying for 100 years, and it's failed to help anyone I'm working with today. So when the idea of decriminalizing substances became something that I could tangibly work on, it was kind of like a dream come true. This is something that us in the harm reduction world have been talking about for decades as like something we've seen and identified as something really crucial to changing this war on drug user idea and the stigmatization of people who use substances. The criminalization leads to the stigmatization. And so if we can remove some of that, we can move to a more health-based approach. So for me, it's really about making sure that the people I am in service of, that I care about, that deserve to be treated as human beings, because that's exactly what they are, have access to the things they need. I'm tired of hearing clients ask me what kinds of crimes they have to commit to be accepted into drug court. I'm tired of hearing about friends and people I know being released from jail and dying the next day because they didn't get any treatment in jail, and your risk of overdose is so much higher when you're released from jail. I'm just really excited and hopeful that this measure can bring some like concrete change and concrete funding for programs like mine and many others across the state, so we can really ramp up and do better, because there's no reason Oregon should be 50th in the nation for access to treatment.
Yeah.
Can I say
Thank you.
something about Haven?
Yeah, please do.
I first met Haven when I walked into her syringe exchange to access harm reduction services. I would not be alive today if it was not for Haven, and I mean that in the utmost sincerity. She gave me my first hepatitis C test. She kept me from contracting HIV, hepatitis C, endocarditis. Seriously, everything I am today is thanks to the service you provide people. Thank you, Haven.
Morgan, I love you, and you did the hard part.
Well, thank you for that. I'm already crying. We're 13 minutes in, but that's beautiful, and it's really real. And I know Outside In has saved so many people's lives, and really deserve a lot of credit for the amazing work that you do in Oregon. Thanks for that. And next, I'd love to hear from Bobby about why you're engaged in the campaign. And I feel like you're so engaged, you might even have a video that folks can watch.
Yes, this is true. No problem at all. Well, again, my name is Bobby Byrd. I am a community organizer on the campaign Measure 110. And I'm really indulged in this and involved in this because I would like to see change. I'm interested in racial justice, and I would like to see change. What happened to me 27 years ago, I don't want to see it happen to anyone else here in the future. And if we can change this and by passing Measure 110, I think it's a big step to changing our future, because our current drug system is not equitable. Our current drug laws are flawed and racist. They were designed to be that way, and are indeed the new Jim Crow. That's why Black people have been consistently arrested at a higher rate than everyone else, even though we all basically use drugs at about the same rate. And this, to me, is morally wrong. And our criminal justice system should be fair and just for everyone, no matter what color of their skin. Okay, so I'm gonna stop right here, right now,
Okay.
and I can go later.
Yeah, I think we'll delve into that because I think it's a really important part of this ballot measure is like removing some of that racial disparity that we see in the system and really shifting that. So Dominic, I think it's time to watch the video.
My name is Bobby Byrd. I'm an Oregonian. I'm a grandfather. I'm a father. I love my kids. I've been clean since '93, but 2.5 decades ago, I was arrested for a small possession of drugs. The one police officer went over and got some drugs out of the bushes. They tell me it's mine. In the courthouses, the only thing I could understand was you could take a plea. So I took the 3 years probation, thinking, okay, do the 3 years probation, pay the court costs, pay all your fines, you should be done. That wasn't the case. This has followed me for over 2.5 decades. It's kept me from getting housing, apartments, getting places near my kids. Now I have to travel 3 hours to go see them. I got a promotion at Intel, got my own little kitchen to cook breakfast kitchen. They do a background check, and next thing you know, I'm getting escorted out the door because of that drug incident. It makes me feel like I'm trapped, like somebody owns me or something. So we need to stop ruining lives and start funding recovery and treatment. Now, if we all come together, we can make this work.
Yeah, it's such a heartbreaking story, but such an incredible video. And yeah, just like, I'm sorry. That's the way the system has worked. And I'm actually just so, policy change is my thing. And I feel like this, this ballot measure really changes things in a way that's substantive. So Sami, do you want to go into like how this ballot measure works and like what it actually does and the policies it changes?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nancy. And I think, Bobby's story is really at the heart of this issue, right? Oregon is facing an addiction crisis right now. We are last in the nation when it comes to access to treatment and recovery services for those who want help. And yet we're one of the highest in the nation in terms of rates of substance use disorder. We have nearly 1 in 10 Oregonians is suffering from substance use disorder over the age of 12 in our state. And 1 to 2 Oregonians dies every day because of an overdose, and those deaths are preventable. So we desperately need to fund these life-saving services while also shifting from a criminalization approach to a health-based approach, because we know that the current system is not working, and the communities of color and LGBTQ plus communities face disparities at every stage. So right now, Oregon is arresting nearly 9,000 people a year, or about 1 per hour, for just possession of the lowest level amounts of drugs for personal use. And so what Measure 110 seeks to do is to shift us to a more effective and humane health-based approach by expanding access to drug treatment, recovery, harm reduction and housing services, and decriminalizing the lowest level possession of drugs. It does not legalize any drugs. Drug-related crime and more serious drug offenses will remain unchanged in the criminal code. But currently, those possession offenses that Oregon charges as misdemeanors, and for some people, depending on their prior criminal background, are continuing to be charged with felony charges for those offenses. So we know that communities like the queer community and like communities of color that have been disproportionately harmed and over-policed in the past are more likely to continue to be charged with serious crimes, even though we've moved those offenses to misdemeanors now. So Measure 110 takes those offenses and decriminalizes them to a civil violation, so much more similar to a traffic ticket. So instead of a criminal record and arrest and jail, people would have access to a free health assessment. So if you were found in possession of drugs for personal use, you would get a $100 ticket that could be waived and dismissed by accessing a free healthcare assessment at one of the addiction recovery centers that is set up by the measure. So the measure takes excess marijuana funds. It does not create any new taxes. Rather, when Oregonians voted to legalize and regulate cannabis in 2014, we estimated that the taxes on those sales would bring in about $17 to $40 million a year. It's now well in excess of $100 million a year. So the measure takes those excess tax revenue and moves it to a drug treatment and recovery fund under the Oregon Health Authority. And those tax dollars can be reinvested in grants for existing service providers like Havens to expand their care in the areas of evidence-based, trauma-informed, culturally responsive care in the areas of drug treatment, recovery, peer-supported recovery, harm reduction, and housing services for folks who use drugs. The funding also goes to establish a network of addiction recovery centers around the state, including a telephone hotline or a web portal, to make it super accessible for people, because we know that in some parts of the state there are virtually no treatment services whatsoever right now. So those are places that folks can go to access an assessment, a caseworker, and have someone help them navigate this confusing system that has long wait lists, that's really hard for people to know where to go when their loved one or themselves is suffering from addiction. And those centers will be a place that will refer people and give them a warm handoff into the appropriate services for them. And they'll be available to anyone who needs them, not just folks who are coming through the criminal justice system. So really available for much more preventative care for folks who need those services.
That's great. Thank you for that. So just thinking about this, and I feel like, Morgan, you've been really open and honest about your experience as someone who did suffer from addiction. I wonder if you could just share a little bit about what your life would have been like if we'd had these kind of policies in place rather than being put in jail over and over again.
I think about that so often, and I cannot answer you. Before I ever had contact with the criminal justice system, and I will never forget this, one of the first times I ever did heroin, I was with my boyfriend at the time, dating men. I overdosed, and he called 911 to save me. And he was arrested and charged with possession. This is before the Good Samaritan law was amended. And we were immediately evicted from our apartment. We were not dependent on heroin. We had used maybe 3 times. He was immediately terminated for his job for a felony. He went to jail in Clackamas County, and it just sort of set our life on a specific trajectory. He lost all hope for his future because he had a felony. We had such big dreams. We had such big dreams for our future. And by the time we were in our early 20s, we were resigned to a life and death in heroin addiction because the criminal justice system had just taken the hope right out of our souls. A felony is forever. And, the stigma and criminalization are synonyms for each other, really. And so this societal stigmatization, we were getting messages, you're a piece of crap, you're worthless. And then getting brought into jail and getting strip searched and say, spread your cheeks and cough. You're like, oh, this is confirming I am worthless. I am less than human. I am not capable of a better future. And so how would my life have been different? had it were not for all these traumatic touches with the criminal justice system that just sort of pushed me towards, deeper and deeper into addiction and then finally into federal prison, I do not know. I don't think any of it would have happened, honestly. Any of it. I don't think, maybe I wouldn't have even got addicted had it not been for one of the first times I ever used. That took away hope for my future, And yeah, just contact with the criminal justice system, it doesn't make you better. It doesn't heal you. It's so traumatic. And if you come on, let's be real. Addiction is often, we have mental health problems, self-esteem issues with ourself, traumas. All right, so we already have these complexes and, maybe I am worthless. And then you get the criminal justice system coming in and saying, yep, that's correct. You're worthless. Don't even try. Don't even aim for better. Know your place. And so, yeah, I often think had these laws been in effect then, even just the Good Samaritan or naloxone, all these, my life history kind of tracks with the history of drug policy in Oregon. Yeah, my life would have been completely different. I have no idea, where I would be now. I am successful now, not because of my incarceration, but despite it. And that is a very important distinction. I was able to buy my reentry success with money I had in savings. No one else could do that. And yeah, so sometimes I sit around and I daydream. Where would I be now if I didn't lose a decade to addiction and incarceration because of not drugs, but drug policy in Oregon? And I don't know. I don't know where I would be. And that question, it hurts my heart. But, what's done is done. My past is my past. This never has to happen to another human being in our state. We have the opportunity to change this. Right now, this is our moment. What happened to me never has to happen again. We can save lives. Stop destroying them. Stop telling people they're worthless. Stop snatching the hope out of people's souls. We're giving people opportunity to enter recovery. We're giving people dignity. So this is a beautiful moment in Oregon history when I look at my life history and how it tracks with policy changes. Because change is beautiful when we're changing for the better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's just so much that's hopeful, I think, about this ballot measure and really making sure that people who don't lose decades of their lives. And speaking of decades, I do have to ask Mr. Bobby here kind of the same question. I feel like you were set up in this way that you were offered something that did not serve you well, to say the very least. And so just thinking about what you imagine would have been different for you had if we'd had, I mean, there's so much in this question, but I just feel like just sort of thinking about your experience, if you want to just share a little bit about what it's meant for you to have these crimes on your record, and just tell us a little bit more about what that's been like for the past 20 years.
Okay, so let's just say I think if this measure had been around 27 years ago, a lot of times I look at myself and I say, maybe I would have been able to go to school and get my license to become a drug and alcohol counselor. I would have been able to go to school and become a phlebotomist. So I had a plan to become a phlebotomist after I found out that I couldn't be a drug and alcohol counselor due to my background. So I said I'll go try and be a phlebotomist. And I told myself, after you become a phlebotomist, then maybe you can move on to radiology. Because if you get a job in a hospital, they often have different classes you can take to move yourself up. So I planned on going there and retiring from there, and then, and even at Wells Fargo and Intel, I got promotions at both of those jobs. I probably never would have left those jobs. I was very happy when I got those promotions. I was very happy. I felt like a citizen. I felt like I had a life again. I would be able to support my family. But unfortunately, each time I got a promotion, the background checks came back, and they were like, well, no, you have a felony background, so we can't have you here. So that conviction that happened to me 27 years ago, when I was arrested for that small amount of drugs, has followed me all my life. And I'm fortunate that I wasn't killed and I didn't lose my life like so many black people have, like Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And for me, I think that if this measure had been in place, there would be so many of us who would not have to live the way I did the past 27 years. I mean, this hurt my ability to provide for my family. This hurt my ability to better myself. It took away from, it's hard to fight with your own self-esteem. You fight yourself for your own self-esteem every day, to pick yourself up and say, nah, I'm not gonna let this hold me back. I'm not gonna let this crush my world. I'm gonna find a way to get through this, and I'm gonna keep fighting it. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm not gonna lose this time. I'm not gonna let this govern me. But unfortunately, the way the laws in Oregon are, it says, no, we are gonna govern you. We are gonna control what you do. We are gonna say that since you have a felony background, you can't work here. Well, since you have a felony background, you can't live here. That's ridiculous. Just because of an addiction, you mean to tell me I can't be a citizen? I pay taxes. You take taxes on my checks, but at the same time, you will only allow me to work mediocre jobs where I have to be susceptible to whatever is going on there. If I want to keep a job and maintain a job, I have to accept whatever's going on there. I worked in a field of, before I got a job in this campaign, I worked in the field of developmentally disabled people for 6.5 years. You know, it took me 6.5 years to get to $15 an hour. So I've been struggling and for years, just surviving, and to be in your own household and have to give yourself a mindset to where every day you leave your home, you have a fear that you may get pulled over for no reason and go to jail or get beaten up or maybe even killed by the police. That's a fear nobody should have to live with at all. So, this every time the police get behind you, you get this feeling and you naturally just freeze up. You lock up almost. You're scared to even look their way. Nobody should have to feel that. So I wish this had been around 27 years ago. And I think that the fact that I think it's the biggest step in change for our future, and it'll keep others, because you don't want to strap young people with that stigma of felony background, and it ruins their life, and they won't be able to elevate themselves. So you don't want to give this to everybody. I'm really serious about this change, and I'm really supporting Measure 110 because I really believe in it, and it's the first step to a big change.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I'm sorry our system is so broken. It just feels like you've continued to be punished for 27 years. It's just not fair. And I think that the decriminalization of possession aspect of this is so important. And then there's the treatment side. And Haven, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you see right now and what you can imagine will happen once this ballot measure is hopefully passed by voters in Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky to be able to serve the drug using community. I usually start off every introduction I get with, I am Haven and I love people who use drugs, and people who use drugs are people that I love. And, you know, I think it's gut wrenching what is happening right now, to be honest. You know, COVID has made everything so much harder. We've been in an addiction crisis for a long time, right? Overdose death rates started going up in the mid 2000s and have continued to go up nationally. Last year was the highest number of overdose deaths on record nationally. I know Sami mentioned 1 to 2 people every day. In the last month, I have confirmed death on 4 people I know, right? It's devastating. And I have folks who are regularly asking about how to access treatment, what services are available, what can they do, how can they make changes in their lives. And truth be told, it's hard. And it's heartbreaking to sit with someone and be like, well, here's your options, get on a wait list, hope you don't die between now and then. Like it's incredibly hard. And, you know, while we have a Good Samaritan law in our state, I regularly hear people telling me they're not going to call 911 for an overdose, that they want naloxone, which is great, but that because they're afraid of police and they're afraid that the cops will show up. I regularly hear people say that they won't seek medical care for infections that they have or illnesses that they're dealing with because they are afraid of the police, even though the medical community rarely calls the police. But those are fears that people have that are creating barriers to folks accessing the care that they deserve. And so for me, you know, like I look at this measure and I think about all of the gaps in our system. Like here in the metro area, things are, while they're not where they need to be, they are so much better than places like Harney County, Coos Bay, you know, Pendleton. Like we have services here. I know people who up until recently were driving in every day for the coast to access medical treatment. That's 2 hours each way. And the only people that can do that are people with transportation, right? And so for me, it's really about, we know that there are so many gaps in our system, and really this is an investment in providing services. Is it going to fix everything? No, we still got a lot of work that needs to do, like that we need to do. And we know that. But this investment is huge compared to where we're at. As someone who's been working with the legislature for way too long around this issue, you know, I was involved with the legalization of naloxone, the Good Samaritan law, all of that, and really been advocating for access to treatment and recovery supports for a very long time. All of those measures have come unfunded, right? There's not been the political will to do it. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this measure is that citizens of this state are stepping up and saying, hey, we got to do something different. Like we agree as a citizenry that this is an issue that needs to be funded, needs to be supported, needs to change. And that makes me really hopeful It just does, because it is devastating to be losing as many people as we're losing right now, right? I'm tired. I'm tired of waiting and having people promise, oh, we'll get this done next year or the year after or the year after that, which I've heard. And every year that's what, 650 people in our state that are going to die? Asking me to wait another 3 years to get $100 million for drug treatment means that 180 people in our state will be dead. And that's barring if nothing changes with our drug supply come COVID, because honestly, I'm terrified of what happens when fentanyl hits our market the same way it has back east, and what that could mean for the lives and safeties of the people I work with. So I'm really so excited about this, because we know harm reduction services work. They're evidence-based practice. We know peer recovery support specialists work. It's evidence-based practice. We know medication, access to treatment, these things all, we actually know how to fix the addiction problem. We just don't fund it to size and scope. And this is a chance to move in that direction. And so I do have a lot of hope for this, because I do believe Oregonians are brave, right? I do believe that we want to take care of each other. And, you know, in these like horrible 2020 times, like this measure, there have been days where working in this campaign has been the only thing that's gotten me out of bed and the only like bright spot in the work I do, because the work I do is sad and scary. It's also hilarious, lovely, love-filled, but not being able to hug on people who use drugs, which is my favorite part of the job, has been really hard. And so I'm very, very hopeful that we can really stop punishing. We don't need to punish people. Addiction sucks. It is a shitty, shitty way to operate in the world. Nobody wants to be in that place. That is punishment enough for people to want to make change when change is available. We do not have to punish people further in order for them to seek help when they're ready in ways that you can provide.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. There is no shortage of passion in this campaign. Definitely, it's not about like policy wonks. This is about all of you, of this lived experience of what it means to be criminalized and to not have access to treatment. And and also just you just reminded me. So like 25 years ago, I worked in a methadone clinic, and I was a kid. I don't know how I ended up in that job, but I don't know. I expected people to be young, and I was just like, oh, these are grandmas and grandpas and people who've been fighting addiction for decades, and methadone alone wasn't enough. Because I saw all the other drugs they were on. And it's really rough. And it was so eye-opening to have that experience of working with addicts and and at the height of the AIDS crisis. And I'll never forget the lessons I learned there, because like really lovely people and some really hard stories. So we have our first question from the audience, which is, I'm so moved by Bobby and Morgan's stories. Would it be possible to pursue a ballot measure or law to expunge drug possession charges from people's records? Sami, do you want to take that question?
Sure, that is a fantastic question. And, we know that one of the wonderful things about ballot measures, and we know this from our experience working on marriage equality, right, as well, And we know from our experience as a state of decriminalizing and or legalizing and regulating cannabis that when voters come together and work on a ballot measure campaign, that it really is an opportunity to shift culture, to change hearts and minds, and to build momentum for future culture change and victory around that issue. And so while Measure 110, we were not able to include retroactive expungement in the measure, I think that we believe that it will pave the way for a future expungement victory, hopefully legislatively. And we know from precedent that that is what happened when we passed cannabis, that the legislature moved to expunge cannabis offenses the following legislative session.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And just so folks know too, like ballot measures can't actually do like 5 things at once. And so it wouldn't really be possible to put that into a ballot measure like this because it's too many things.
That's right. There is a limit to the legality of changing how many laws you can change in a ballot measure. So by changing the criminal code to decriminalize a personal possession of a controlled substance and expanding funding for treatment services, that was as expansive as we could be in the measure. But one of the things that's really fantastic about the measure is that it is not overly prescriptive, so that service providers around the state and those that are investing particularly in communities of color and culturally specific care will be able to use that funding in ways that they see benefit the clients that they serve the most. We also know that, as Bobby was speaking to, in Oregon, people use drugs at similar rates, but African Americans are 3 times as likely to be arrested. And we know that LGBTQ folks are twice as likely to suffer from addiction, but half as likely to be able to access care, particularly, culturally responsive care. So one of the things that I love so much about this measure is that we know that it will target those disparities and start to undo some of that past harm that has been done, disproportionately harming communities of color. In fact, we were the first ballot measure in the state to get a racial and ethnic impact statement by the state that if Measure 110 passes, it is expected according to the Criminal Justice Commission, to reduce racial disparities in drug arrests by 94% for Black and Indigenous folks, and to reduce personal drug possession convictions by 95%. So really having a transformational approach to decriminalizing those future convictions and, again, hopefully building momentum to remove some of the harm for folks who have been criminalized in the past.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've seen statistics in the past that puts our criminalization of Black people in our state similar to that of like Mississippi, which I don't think people think of Oregon in that way, of having that kind of level of racial disparity in sentencing and who's in our prisons, and that this measure actually shifts that piece so much is really remarkable. And I think it's pretty brilliant. And then you mentioned LGBTQ folks, and I wonder, Morgan, if you want to talk a little bit about just like treatment possibilities for LGBTQ folks, and if there is treatment out there that really right now, or what you could folks who are in the LGBTQ community, because we know that as folks see it outside in and other places, that we are using substances.
Yeah, I spent 2 years in county jail, and I would just talk to the people coming through it. At first, I thought, this can't be right. This can't be right. It can't. That 1 in 3 to 1 in 2 of the people, the women I'm talking to, are identifying as queer. And I thought, this. No, they're lying. This can't be. 50% of the population is not queer. Now that I've had some formal academic education, I see it. As a queer person, I am just statistically more likely to experience trauma. And trauma is the underlying root of many people's addiction. And then so we're doubly stigmatized. We're stigmatized for being queer. We're stigmatized for using drugs. And then these stigmatizations compound, and we're excluded further and further out from society, and more likely to get arrested and end up in jail. And yeah, that is just a point I wanted to emphasize, that Multnomah County Jail is full of people identifying as queer that were either arrested for drugs or are getting a probation violation for drug use or whatever. Incredible disparity. I thought, I was like, no, this cannot exist, but it exists. It's happening today. And then for access to treatment, again, so we have compounding stigma. In our current society, first up, not only is it incredibly hard to access treatment, as Haven said, there's waiting lists and there's hurdles and there's bureaucracy and there, forms and there's just all these things layered on top of each other. And so then when it's already hard to access treatment, and you feel even more isolated from mainstream society because you're queer, and it's especially difficult for people who are trans. That's what I saw the most in treatment centers, which are often set, gendered. And so we don't know where to put you. Come on, it's 2020. It's Oregon. It's so embarrassing. And so we have compounding stigmatizations that are just making it so much less likely for us to get the help that we need. Not only is it making us less likely to ask for the help, but even if we do ask, the chances that we can receive it are so small, it's embarrassing. And so there is an extreme dearth of treatment services available to LGBTQ folks, even in the Portland metro. And, I will admit, I'm fairly urban. I'm born and raised in Portland, so I don't really know what it's like outside of Portland. But if it's this bad inside of Portland, which is famous for being a queer city, I cannot imagine what it is like in the other parts of the state. And this measure, it's a lack of money, right? Nobody has the money for these treatment and recovery services. Yeah. So follow the money. If we just had more money, there could be more services. It's actually pretty simple.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Haven, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but I feel like we've heard often that, 40% of the kids living on the streets of Portland do identify as LGBTQ. Does that ring true for you in your work at Outside In?
Yeah, of course it does. I'm just there's no big answer to that. It's like, yeah, it is true. And, just hearing Morgan, I always love listening to Morgan talk about pretty much anything ever. But, I'm thinking of clients that I've worked with who have identified as trans and having to go out of state to access appropriate care for them, right? That, people really struggle to find a space that is affirming and aligns with their identity currently. And it's I'm thinking about this one human in particular who just struggled for years, also had some co-occurring other mental health issues. And this person's not alive today. Yeah, it was years of calling around, trying to come up with a plan, trying to get this person the care they need. And unfortunately, they didn't make it. I don't want to make it sound like people who use drugs all die. because it's not true. I have way too many amazing friends, including Morgan, who are, you know, people who lived through it, got the support that they needed, are in different places. There's way more people in recovery, right, currently, than probably even people currently with substance use disorders. So I hope it doesn't sound, I don't want it to sound like everyone dies, right? But the reality of it is some do. And, you know, I would love to see LGBTQ specific treatment options for folks, right? I want people to be able to get the support they need in their communities regardless. And I really am hopeful that because of in part because of the wide coalition of folks that have signed on to this measure, right? That accountability and that buy-in that this measure is important will help ensure that we do that, and we do that in an appropriate way.
Yeah. It's just like so much, but I'm really excited, and I feel like this piece about being brave is so important. Yeah, I just feel like Oregonians, we need to be brave. We need to like think about our futures. We need to think about our children's futures. We need to think about the society we want to live in, a society that doesn't punish someone over and over and over again for a drug possession 27 years ago. And yeah, I'm just really moved by all of you. You know, thank you for sharing your stories and for being here and making this happen. And yeah, so thank you all for being here. And is there a way for people watching to be engaged, Sami?
Thanks so much for asking, Nancy. There are a lot of great ways to help the campaign right now, and it's so, so important. We know that Oregonians across the state are ready to pass Measure 110. It has broad support from a huge coalition of over 120 medical associations, community groups, and racial justice organizations, and you can learn more about those by visiting our website, voteyeson110.org. But we still need your help to get over the finish line because ballots are arriving this week. If you're not registered to vote at your current address, today is the last day to update your voter registration to vote yes on Measure 110. And ballots are arriving this week and people are going to start voting. So one of the biggest ways that you can help the campaign is by going to our website or going to the link that we're going to share in the chat and signing up for a shift to call and text voters and urge them to vote yes. We're going to have a big text bank on Saturday because we know that because of Trump's threats to the election that a lot of folks are going to vote early and people are going to be voting this weekend. So you can join us for a texting party. It's fun and easy. We're going to do it remotely and you can do it from the comfort of your own home this Saturday at 1 o'clock. And you can also donate. A donation of any size helps show broad support for the measure. So you can go to vote yes on 110 to do that. And thank you so much. And remember to vote and turn in your ballot by November 3rd.
Thank you so much. Obviously, Basic Rights Oregon supports this ballot measure. And yes, so thank you all for being on this show. And for folks watching, you can also phone bank tonight. We're starting our Get Out the Vote efforts, and we'll be phoning for Secretary of State Shamia Fagan tonight with Shamia Fagan. So it should be a great night, and thank you all so much for your time. I'm so appreciative of all the work you're doing, and I can't wait for us to have a brave new drug policy here in Oregon that is sane and thoughtful and sees people for their whole selves. So thank you all for the important work you're doing.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you, Nancy.
Take care. Bye.
All right, bye guys.